Hey, how you doing? You doing good? I'm doing pretty good. Here today we have a series that I have been meaning to check out for a rather ridiculous amount of time actually. Was it because I heard it was really good? No. Was it because I thought it looked like the kind of series I'd generally be interested in? Again, no. The reason was because all I knew about it was at some stage some guy shouts Arang! So I was like, well, it's got my name in it, so it must be great. But little did I know this Arang character was actually not at all important and is actually introduced in the same scene he dies. So that's bloody brilliant, isn't it? But either way, hello, welcome back, and I present to you a review of Darker Than Black,黒の契約者, a 25-episode supernatural action mystery series. Aired during the spring season of 2007, was produced by the studio Bones and was written and directed by Tensai Okamura. Disregarding the fact that I went in expecting to spend some time with one named as I am, I was still looking forward to, you know, the story and all that, which goes as follows. 10 years ago in Tokyo, a strange thing called Hell's Gate appeared which messed up and changed the sky and surrounding landscape. The stars disappeared, were replaced with fake ones, and around this time some humans were able to attain special abilities, and these people are known as contractors. These people's abilities come in all sorts of varieties as you'd expect, but the interesting thing about them is, as their name suggests, they enrolled in some form of a contract. They are each linked with one of these fake stars, and in order to use their powers must pay a price of some description, which can basically be anything from eating a rich tea biscuit to breaking their fingers. After an incident known as Heaven's War, a faction known as the Syndicate have seized control over many areas, essentially becoming the world's #1 political power. A minor member of this syndicate, a Chinese contractor known as Hei, serves as the protagonist of our story, and his life revolves around undertaking various tasks on their orders. These tasks vary across the series from things like assassination, collecting important objects, and general things you'd expect from one who is for all intents and purposes a secret agent. The story operates from the perspective of Hei's group, following the tasks they're assigned by the syndicate, but it also spends time looking at the world from a more human police perspective. This eventually all builds up and converges into a story of uncovering the mysteries behind the state of the world, its history, and generally, you know, being a rather enjoyable piece of fiction. The first thing I found quite interesting about this thing's story is that it employed not an episodic method of storytelling, but instead a series of 2-episode arcs from the start up until around episode 20. So it would tell you a story of one of Hei and the gang's jobs across a 2-episode span, and once that is resolved, it would then move on to another. These stories shared many themes across them, and later on we get returning characters and the like to show there being an overarching development connecting them together. But for the most part, it was simply a series of fairly unrelated events, which for me carries problems because I have mentioned a few times before, episodic series aren't really my cup of tea. Though I must say that this 2-episode arc format actually sat a lot better with me than truly episodic series do, and I actually really did like it in the end. Some of the issues I was having revolved around the earlier arcs lacking any sort of urgency or scale to the repercussions that went along with them. But you see, as the series went on and the overarching story grew and grew, this changed and each segment began having relevance outside of the confines of the arc at hand. It's when these incidents started having true relevance and importance beyond whatever job the syndicate had laid out that I began to get fully immersed in this thing's world. And the actual tone this thing gave off to me was very serious throughout, but because of a quite relaxed and calm attitude a good chunk of the cast gave off, it was able to balance itself out. A lot of the time, as the title suggests, it was darker than black, but due to the presentation of its characters, it never felt too dense or overbearing. It displayed the world in such an interesting state, and the high variance in the themes each story dove into allowed for a fully developed and in many ways unique viewing experience. But because of how the story was told and that tone I just mentioned, the story was so easily consumable. It was layered and interesting, but never would you get lost in anything, because at the same time it's all very simple. In this regard, you can look at certain things this series brought to the table that are fairly generic conceptually, but then have many unique tweaks to keep it exciting. Like with the contractors themselves, the idea of having an incident leaving humanity with the potential of unlocking special abilities is hardly a new thing at all, but what they did with it really impressed me. For starters, the actual powers themselves weren't just your generic Barry can fly and Mary can turn invisible. We had some really mad abilities, like using your blood as a catalyst that blows holes in things when you snap your fingers, or transferring your consciousness into animals. It was really cool, and the whole concept of having to pay a unique cost was also something that seemed like a really good idea to me, though I don't actually recall if they explained how the contractors knew what their contract actually was, because it'd be a bit weird if it was just like, oh banging, I can charge my phone with my finger. But bro, you've got to watch an episode of Desperate Housewives now or you'll explode. Beyond this though, it did just feel like a really damn solid premise overall, and it was cool, slick and stylish in its presentation, so I was all over it. One thing I felt it was lacking though was a clear antagonist, because while there are a couple of returning villains here and there, and in some regards there was a final boss figure in the end, there was no one brain behind what was going down. But don't misunderstand me here, as I don't deem this to be a bad thing, and a lot of it is down to the fact that aside from a few obviously crooked characters here and there, the show didn't really have good guys and bad guys. The obvious villains and side characters ended up being really well varied and legitimately compelling, but the thing is, beyond them, all the important characters were only really conflicted over clashing ideals and different stances on what the right course of action was. It was this that made the main group of four we followed to be such a compelling group, as they were the heroes of our story, but they did a lot of morally questionable things throughout the series. The group consists of Huang, the grumpy old ex-cop who sorts out the jobs and moans a lot; Yin, the blank, distant and emotionless artificial doll who tracks people; Mao, the talking cat;
Hello! Evelyn. How are you? Fine, thank you.
Oh my god!
Not that talking cat. And hey, our protagonist, the contractor and the main member of the group when it comes to doing the dirty work. And he was a pretty fantastic character. He was a really mysterious and solemn individual, and one of the biggest things you can pick up from him is that his actual personality is completely in the dark. One of the big things this story presents about contractors is that they have in many ways given up their humanity. They emotionlessly and calmly assess situations and do what they need to, unhampered by human qualities and urges that get in the way of making decisions. There is more to it than that, but Hay himself shows these qualities in such a way that makes him a really fantastic character to follow. His group's histories are fully developed by the end of the series, and they make for such a diverse faction with the completely different backgrounds and motivations they all hold. And Hay displayed many of the things that a great protagonist needs to, and he wore a green coat that reminded me of Kenzo Tenma from Monster, so I can't really fault the guy. Though he does also like rocking a white mask that makes it look like he is desperately trying to become a member of Slipknot. The character designs were great overall though, with a lot of them coming across as being very realistic and simple, and others being far more out there and memorable. This made some of the more eccentric characters stand out as they should, and others who had a much more subtle role presented to be very human and natural. I was actually surprised by this in places, because overall it displayed a very dull and dark serious aesthetic, so when they did throw in characters with pink hair I was expecting to be weirded out by it. But no, it all worked and, well, looked rather smashing. And the animation quality was really impressive, as there were quite a few action scenes in this thing, and they were all absolutely fantastic. It was smoothly done, it was incredibly consistent, and of that seriously high quality we know Bones are capable of when they're at their best. Only thing I did find stupid was almost irrelevant, yeah, but the advert break screens had these stupid Photoshop pictures of cats on them, and it looked like arse. It was essentially just like picture of a cat, plastic wrap filter. Fan-fucking-tastic. Why exactly? Anyway, the remaining thing for us to talk about is the sound, and the first thing on my agenda for this is that I absolutely adored a ton of the background music. So like, remember before when I said this thing had a really serious tone, but some things made it so that seriousness wasn't overpowering or whatever? Well, in a lot of the chase scenes and stuff, we had some tracks I could only describe as Starsky and Hutch music. Lots of hilariously jazzy upbeat 80s cop show vibes, and it worked so well, I thought it was great. It of course wasn't just this though, as there was a fitting slew of other music in there for parts where that was necessary. And man, the voice acting was pretty damn stellar as well. I got such a big vibe of believable humanity from a majority of the cast, and Hay's actor's performance was just brilliant. No complaints at all from me here, I must say. It was a seriously strong showing from both the actors themselves and those who are in charge of the casting. So there we go, I've seen Darker Than Black now. Hooray! I really enjoyed this show. Disregarding the lack of a character with my name in it having an impact on the story, I thought it was bloody good. I had fairly high expectations based on the hype surrounding it, and all I can say is that it truly does deserve its reputation. And thus today I shall be donking a dark 82% rating on Darker Than Black, and would say checking it out is a thing you should probably do. In the UK, this thing is licensed by Manga Entertainment, Down Under by Madman, and the US by Funimation, where it is available for streaming on their site. So, have you seen this show? If so, what did you think of it? And as always, feel free to drop me a recommendation of what you want me to review next. I have every reason to believe that I shall see you next week. Alan! 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 Alan!